What's up, guys? It is Wednesday evening here I guess it's not Wednesday evening for everybody, but here in California, it's Wednesday evening, and that means it's time for Immortal Minds and time for some analysis and VOD reviews. And I'm here with Mike, of course, as per the usual. And today we'll be looking at Liquid's attacking side versus FPX on Ascent from the Blast Invitational tournament. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of Liquid in general because they are running a triple duelist comp in this competition. And I think Mike and we decided that we wanted to start off by maybe addressing that in general before we go into the rounds specifically. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good. I'm ready to put some of this mess that I've seen all over Twitter and Reddit about this comp to rest, hopefully. So,
Nice, nice. Okay, well, where should we start? Because I feel like I feel like we both are on the same page with this. We both agree with each other. So, what, I'm gonna let you take it away. What's your first major gripe or concern with the way people perceive Liquid's triple duelist setup?
well, obviously, like everything that people attacked first was the no smokes, right? Even though, like in the earlier stages, I'm pretty sure they weren't running Jet, instead it was Rays, but then they switched. I have to refrain from calling them by their first names, Link or to Jet. So then you do have smokes, which are actually really good for the attack, because we said like they last 7 seconds, you can put them about anywhere. So it's not like you're lacking smokes. But the one thing we were trying to like tell people about, because I think you and I both made a tweet about it and brought it up a bit, was just that like your objectives change when you lack certain utility on the attacking side and the defensive side. So the way Liquid are going to play these rounds isn't going to be like super defaulty like you would with an Omen, like Angel plays them and you're trying to get like control of certain areas like very slow and grind out utility. Like they're trying to take a little bit of map control as quick as they can, and then they're just trying to burst and take fights, and they're just going to keep trying to take controlled fights where you're put in a really bad position because they have a lot of good utility. Like they have a lot of flashes in this comp. They have Phoenix's wall and his molly, which are really good, which they did a good job of using on these executes. I just think like people waited on the smokes like way too much and wasn't actually the reason they were losing these matches. A lot of these matches, it doesn't really matter what comp they had because it was kind of like personal misplays, like they're misplaying post plants or just like approaching a situation in not the right way, and that's what really lost them some of these rounds. And it wasn't just the comp. And it's also kind of funny because when we had Eccles and Soulcast on, we asked them like, do you think people will scapegoat what comps people use as an excuse instead of actually looking at what happened in these rounds, what people did wrong? And a week later, 2 weeks later, everyone's like, oh, it's because you lack smokes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a it's that classic sort of human psychology thing at play. I don't know exactly how it would be defined if there is a definition for it, but just this idea that people tend to have a reductionist viewpoint on things when they don't themselves have the big picture understanding of all the elements at play. So they only work within their understanding. And so for most people, the understanding is limited at what they can see, which is the interaction of the compositions and some of the basic interactions there. And as you say, we have this. There's a lot of hidden things in terms of how you play TAC FPS really well at the top level. And whilst the compositions themselves may actually serve to maybe modify some of those things, let's say timings, the way that you have your pacing to your rounds, when the things that in of itself, that very simple idea itself can actually change a lot in a game. Or it could be, as you say, like a post plant setups and just generally how you tend to coordinate your team. Are you playing more of a default style of play? Did you make a bad read? Did you just guess wrong? There's lots of things that people just don't really have the ability to articulate, I feel. So we just tend to go back to this idea of the compositions. They didn't have smokes, and smokes are classically needed in all of these compositions to well, I suppose maybe that's the next point actually, because I think that's something we should attack, Mike. The idea that you need smokes in a composition. I think that's an important point here, because one thing that I heard a lot of people saying was that, oh, they should have just thrown Omen into the lineup. Now, obviously, they're running triple duelists, so that's kind of locked in the three duelists. They want to do that. They want to have their Reyna, they want their Jet, and they want their Phoenix. So, and they've got the Breach as well. So, and Breach is obviously to abuse the fact that Breach is mad. Like, was already pretty mental, but now he's truly a madman with three flashes. It's kind of unbelievable how good he is. So, you've got four agents locked in. So, people are saying that, okay, you should throw Omen in there for the smokes instead of Killjoy. What do you think, Mike, will be the arguments to have the Killjoy over the Omen? Do you think there is anything to having the Omen instead in the composition?
I think the issue you run into is like when you look at these duelists, except for like maybe Phoenix, they're not like super valuable in a post plant scenario, especially on the attacking side. Like on retakes, I think this comp is really good if you have a decent amount of utility left over, but on post plants, you really have to be taking fights. Well, let's identify what smokes are doing when you're post planning, right? You're trying to deny vision into the site, you're trying to block off areas, you're trying to make sure they're slowed down on their way in. Well, you want to be trying to face some of these areas. So while you could like use Omen to maybe block off one area and try to fight another, generally you're just using smokes in a post plant scenario to like slow down the enemies. And generally against like duelists like this, that's only going to hurt you. I would think personally, because you should be trying to face, because your utility um, value is the best way to put it, isn't as strong in a post plant. I think also like Killjoy goes in really well with this comp because one, on this map I think they did a really good job at like covering both extremities for pushes with her utility, which we'll see in one of these rounds. And then Killjoy's ult on this map, we've seen like from Cloud9 and Envy on the same map from Pop Flash is extremely valuable, especially when you're doing those bursts onto a site. So I think overall Killjoy is a better pick just for those few reasons, and identifying like what the actual reason for picking this comp is.
Yeah, I like the idea too that behind the ult, it does create this ability for you to save some of that precious utility, and you know because you won't have to spend the flashes, which is the operative piece of utility between the agents to gain the control of a position. So you can have those to have available for the post plant and so on. And yeah, so I definitely agree. I think Killjoy also given the fact that you're not going to really be defaulting on this comp so very much, if at all. Your standard, as you mentioned previously, is going to be a style of play that operates more around contacting and bursting and grouping up. So one of the other benefits of the Killjoy over the Omen is that you have the turret that can serve and the alarm bot that can serve as much like Cypher's utility as a warning if the other team is exploiting naturally where what your weakness is with a contact based play. Because when people look at triple duelist at the pro level, they should assume that you're not trying to default because you couldn't possibly default effectively with no smokes. You need smokes to default correctly. You need the denial of information. So, in not having that in your composition, you must have something that can. You must be aware that they are going to be grouping up in positions. So, you as the in the defender's shoes should be looking at ways to exploit that, and the natural way to exploit that is by pushing the extremities and trying to get that info as to where they are not, because that's probably going to be fairly reliable most of the time. So that's another huge plus of the Killjoy over the Omen that I think in of itself is a huge, a big enough win for me.
And I think with that, we've pretty much established like every corner, I guess, of why we think this comp wasn't exactly like it wasn't the reason like people thought it was failed, because they did make some adjustments, and we obviously both know like Sliggy, so we've heard some inside information on it, but it was just kind of like we're gonna try this comp. I think it would have been a good comp to test against G2 as well, just with how they play, because they do really well against teams that kind of default, like FPX generally. So I think it was a good change of pace, and we're both glad to see experimentation at this level already.
Yeah, totally agree. I definitely do encourage anyone who has any questions, if we haven't already answered them about liquid composition or any concerns you may have for it. But yeah, just throw that in the chat and we'll try to pick them up as we go. But yeah, as you pointed out, Mike, I think it more or less does it from my perspective as well. So we can go into the first round of this match.
Yeah, so I think this was a read from Liquid because you can see on the main map how they're going to be positioned here, so I'll play it forward a bit. So we can see what they're doing to set up right here. So Link is outside A main, he's the Jet, and he's going to have a shorty, so he's just holding for a push right here. They have the Killjoy turret, and then the Killjoy alarm bot over towards B main, and they just have a setup outside B main here. And they're basically just going to hold for all these aggressions, so they must have seen something where they're prepared for FPX trying to get control of one of these areas, and FPX goes for mid control here, so they recon tiles and then smoke it off. And then Zipban's going to get in a really advanced position, but Liquid are so ready for any sort of push here. So they know they gave up mid, so they're going to check this later if they need to. But I really like the setup outside B with the alarm bot. You got two people hiding the face if anyone pushes, and then you got A covered as well.
Yeah, it kind of, it's about like one of the super important principles is knowing your openings. And again, like as we had talked about this composition, it's such a stark composition. It's going to have clear strengths and clear weaknesses. So you have to know how to deal with your own weaknesses. So I do enjoy that this is already, as you highlighted, a clear attempt from Liquid to understand that, okay, we have these weaknesses. We'll make sure that we will catch any plays where our opponent will try to exploit those weaknesses, and perhaps you can even play against that expectation as well. So and of course, actually, what's interesting here is obviously the what I thought was really cool is like Link actually lurking with that shorty towards A main, looking for the push, especially because they have the turret up as well. So it kind of looks like that there would never be Link there. So I thought that was a very cool touch.
Yeah, they had like two bait subs on the extremities. One thing, and this just keeps annoying me in all of these matches. It's like, so yeah, you now have full mid control of Zippin, and then Shadow's playing off him at mid. You have a decent setup towards B with Meadow on Cypher backside. He's got his cam towards B main, and then Angel's in market, so he's looking through. Now, Shao on Sova is like the one thing with Sova, right, is like you can get info for free. You don't have to push, you don't have to risk dying to get that information. So this kind of annoys me when we resume here that he's just pushing. He still has a recon dart, so it's like you do have mid control. So now it's a wonder of is it A or B, and then you just fall for this like trap that they set outside A main, and now everything changes in the round because now you give up mid control because now you're worried about them bursting on A. And it's just this entire domino effect because then Liquid rotates back around because they got this pick on A. And now they also know, okay, well, their Sova's gone, so there goes like a lot of their information in this round. So now it really is down to like, do you have someone else push to get info? Are they playing a stack off of May? They got mid control, but then they just burst onto A here.
Yeah, and it's like the server pick so early into the round because as you say, like he has that info gathering util. It's like such a huge win for a composition like this, where it's all about making sure that they don't realize where you're bursting in time. So yeah, I totally agree. It did seem kind of greedy, given the fact that, as you say, there was a clear pause in the round. Given that there was that mid control, I think you covered that exactly like what I was thinking there as well. And we see that fault line there from the held position up onto rafters. That's actually a fault line that in this game is, I think, amazing. It's actually so strong, and it was cool to see the usages of it. It seems like once you get breach underneath there in that position where he can do like run that fault line, it's so nuts because it creates like a really a really difficult dynamic given the fact that typically for most successful A retakes, you need to have a rafters push just simply because it can clear so many angles and you can just drop onto the site and get behind the cover. So it can help you to deal with any players in a main or tree, but you also need to have tree control. That seems to be like the two main things. And it's usually an assumption that you can get rafters for free actually most of the time. But I feel like this breach fault line that we saw in that position really creates a lot of problems because you can't really avoid it. Like it's very hard to avoid it.
Yeah, and we'll see a different setup they do later where they do that same fault line, except then they jump up on the box and peek it while they're stunned up there. It's kind of like you can see that Liquid know like we really need to be trying to take fights at some point when they're retaking. So that's why Soulcast is saying under Balk he's got the flash out just in case they swing out, so then people are ready to swing on that. But they do have like set like protocols for these post plans. So it's not like you really need smokes either, because now you're actually having set plays to try to gain more advantages in these post plans when people are trying to retake.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. I think that they had actually. I also noticed that too, like pretty good protocols, and especially given that we've seen a lot of teams that are good at taking sites, but not necessarily having the correct uh, pathing or protocols for the post plan. It is definitely great to see that. And going to the second round, this was a pretty standard anti-eco. I know that in the notes, Mike, you had a few mentions about some of the strengths of this composition, and I was thinking as well that like in a situation like an anti-ecos are not necessarily ever a given, especially at the professional level. There's always something that these players can do, but it is interesting that I feel like this composition might be the strongest composition I can actually think of in an anti-eco situation because you have so many flashes that I think it's, and especially with Breach as well, with the ability for him to clear through, with stuff with the aftershock and the fault line, it actually feels like there's just actually nothing you can do. I feel like it's so strong and so many flashes.
Yeah, I think the flashes is a huge part, especially when you're coming out B here, because we talk about this all the time. Like, it feels like teams give a lot of respect to, like, when they're on an anti-eco against an eco, but when you don't have smokes, like, then you're just going out, you're flashing, you have Breach's fault line, of course, but you're still not blocking off those angles. But at the same time, it's usually better to try to refrain from smoking off angles on these anti-ecos because one, you have the better gun, so you're more favored in these duels, and then two, it just makes things really confusing when people are hiding in your smokes, especially when you have like you drop your smokes like spawn and market, and then maybe angel smoke something. It just gets very confusing. But now once they get these two picks here, then they can do all the things like we said later on, where they can just use all their flashes, even though Echoes only has one left. But that's the thing when you have Reyna and Phoenix, you have like so many flashes at your disposal. It doesn't really matter. This one will get the person sidewalk. They have another one they throw in the air for anyone spawn. It's like you just have all your bases covered and you're just taking these duels that heavily favor you rather than like leaving a bunch of areas for people to hide in with smokes or whatever.
Yeah, it feels like you can deal with so much stuff that you are not as able to easily deal with, and it's mostly just because like it's the opportunity cost thing again. And this is a composition that is definitely designed to get most of the rounds on the attack, because it's you don't have smokes, so and you've got a lot of agents that have the a lot of get in ability, as it were, and so it's really cool to see that that actually also just translates to having very, very strong anti ecos, a lot of resilience in these kinds of rounds. It's a very mobile composition in that sense as well. So able to, in theory, adapt and react to things very quickly too. But into round three we go.
Yeah, so this is after FPX clear out B main, but doesn't really matter because Liquider is going to go for this really fast A burst. And I really like how they isolate this generator angle for a Link to just go through. He can clear out backside. But Meadow has really good counter utility here because then basically his two cages funnel everyone up through the generator angle. Then Zippin's above on the balcony and they're so worried about, okay, we need to clear out under Balk that there's not really much they can do. But I do like how they tried to isolate like Link going up the generator angle. That buys them a lot of space coming out A main. It's just Meadow and Zippin had a really good setup there under Balk and top Balk.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add really. I think you covered it. It's pretty straightforward rounds ultimately. Fast mid, fast contact play, and I think one thing that's interesting is just generally how good the contact style can be in this game. I feel like in some respects, in North America at least, it's been a little bit unexplored just because of the way the meta has been more about default oriented compositions, and there's not as much experimentation, and there's a lot more focus on the jet meta as well. So it's I think between this triple duelist experimentation with Liquid as well as G2's dominance with also a fairly contact based style, it's kind of interesting to see like what works, and it feels like a lot of stuff works in this game.
Yeah, I think as well, like, if this comp had another month before this tournament, I feel like Liquid would possibly be in the finals against G2. I just think that no one's really had to play against a comp like this because we've seen the teams that like stack super heavy on the Sentinels that slow the rounds down. There's a bunch of teams that just do like kind of defaults, like we said in NA, it's predominant, and then there's a few teams that kind of like do the exec type stuff like Gen G, but there's not a whole lot of teams that really do like this burst type style where you're taking really fast aggression here, which we kind of see on this round, where they just go for a super heavy mid control and they're all just going to face at the same time. So Scream flashes out, they can just peek mid because they have the flashes covered, keep running up. And then Shao's pushing B main, but he has all this info. And this is, I'll just pause it quick. This is normally what really irritates me because teams with Killjoy, right, they'll put the turret down somewhere, but they won't really use the alarm bot at all. And this is like your equivalent of having a second Cypher trip because now when he pushes through, the alarm bot activates and then they can get all this info, which I feel like there's a lot of teams I see that don't really use the alarm bot as much as they should be.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, like if you think about Ascent as a map, Ascent as a map to me strikes me, and I was having this thought when I was watching this again. It strikes me as a map which is really good for this kind of composition because one of the weaknesses of this composition is that it is the stuff you're doing is fairly telegraphed because all you have in this comp to prevent that from being the case is the utility that Killjoy offers to at least give warning if the other team is pushing. But in the sense that if you are taking position with your players, that pressure is felt and it's very readable as to what you're doing on most maps with this composition. However, Ascent I feel like is slightly different because you can do these mid plays where you can take mid with full force and create rotations into defenders, yet it's still not clear what you're doing. So that's actually I think a huge benefit to this composition too in this particular map is the mid dynamic I think is particularly suitable.
It's a good point, especially with like how many teams we see just totally give up mid and they just use like even FPX kind of do it where they lean off mid because they use Cypher utility there, whether it's a trip or something like that. And I think Liquid came in with like a really good game plan to kind of play around that since a lot of teams are giving up mid and but they just have that ability, like you said, to take control and then draw those rotations in their favor and then they can do that kind of explosive type hit afterwards.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of that game we did when we did the co-stream of Pulse, and we saw Mamba Mose versus LG, and LG had like an insanely sick hold on B between was it Venerated and a Proto, I think
Yeah,
it
that
was,
was it. Sova and
and
Cypher.
it felt like the B site should have been in theory very solvable if let's say ahead of time Mamba Mode could have realized that that was going to be like they were going to be getting these B splits, but they could just never seem to have the right kind of execution. And I feel like set piecing with all of the flashes that are available in this particular composition, I feel like that wouldn't have been as successful like what Venerated and the Proto were doing. So it's an interesting one because as you say, Mike, like in the meta currently, you can get like mid control. And the thing is that like it kind of forces a rotation off of the A site. And you guys have a pretty decent rotation through cat to tree if you want to kind of exploit that. And you can represent a huge amount of pressure for a B split whilst you could actually be taking cat. So it kind of reminds me of Dust 2 a little bit in that sense. Whereas with Dust 2, there's lots of ways to like really convince the CTs to draw a player into CT spawn whilst they're already playing 2 on B, leaving the A site very open. and the CT's thinking, "Oh, we don't know if it's a B split or not, but we're really afraid of B splits because B splits and Dust 2 in CS are really strong. And so we have to just respect that and pull a rotation off of A, weakening it." I feel like this is the same scenario actually. And this should actually be the default most teams are working with. That heavy mid pressure, threatening B control, getting B main control at the same time, and then drawing that rotation into spawn. And because they have to respect the pressure, and then it gives you the option to either have some kind of take versus spawn, or to punish that player, isolate him, or to go for the B split because that's still probably good, or you still have the option towards A. And that's kind of exactly the dynamic on Dust 2 that exists in CS.
Yeah, I hope eventually as well we see like I know spawn is really awkward with the elevation, but I think with enough like practice and ingenuity, you could definitely make some really cool like basically three-prong splits through defender spawn, especially towards B. I feel like it's a lot easier, but maybe we'll see that in the future because I feel like team defenders especially are gonna have to um, put more emphasis on mid in the future with how teams are starting to get around them, giving up mid control and then stacking like 3A towards CAD or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to become very attacker sided. I have a feeling, but when people kind of get to the hang of it, kind of like, I mean, honestly, in Counter Strike, it was most maps followed the same trajectory. Most maps start off fairly defender sided, and then as teams begin to understand the early and mid round dynamics behind map control, they then create a situation where the CTs just lose map control over time, and then are just at a disadvantage, and it's actually trickier for the CTs to then have to like be innovative to then find ways to push for information in ways that make sense. Now that the T's understand how to throw their utility and just dominate certain map positions on the map, and I feel like this map will absolutely go the same way. Yeah,
So on this next round for this anti-eco, you can see they're Liquid are playing like really passive on the extremities with all of Killjoy's utility. So like you can see Link, there's a little hut back here in the back that you can updraft on top of, and he has an angle you can see towards A main, and he can play off the turret, and then Soulcast is just playing off the alarm bot here outside B main. So they have like a really good contact set up in case there's like an eco push on one of these areas that they can play off the Killjoy utility. The one thing with this round is the way Liquid approach mid because they get smoked off here, but you can still kind of assume since you're not hearing a lot mid, we can just wait it out. We can go after. They flash through mid, which I think the angle on the flash was a little bit short. I'm pretty sure Scream Reyna flashes eventually here. Because they're playing this super cautious, they've known no one's pushed B main, so now they can try to push B main. Eccles does a fault line for them. Oh yeah, this was the round where they aftershock cap, but Zippin's sitting on top of the box there, so they don't know this angle's cleared out. And this is where I would have liked a third person when you're trying to take mid control, because the angles are so awkward here when you're trying to approach. So like then Zippin's going to be on Cat here. He gets the kill on Eccles because they don't really have anyone posted up on Cat yet. It's just like a really awkward angle to try to take mid control of two people. If you had like some, see that's a situation where you might be able to blame it on like, oh they could have had a smoke there and then it would have prevented it. But there's also other ways to prevent that. Like if Link was there posted up with an with his op or something like that.
yeah, we just it's just breaking the composition isn't the solution.
Yeah.
To something that has other solutions that are quite reasonable. I completely agree. Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. It is one of those things where I don't know how much practice and experimentation like we've got with all of this before running it, but yeah, those are some of those things where you might not you won't be ever able to think of everything, and especially when you have to play a bunch of different rounds and some of the calls might be on the fly. It will take some time for people to generate various protocols, and I think credit to FPX for understanding that they could like get some more pressure on Catwalk to find some advantages there. Zippin out actually has an insanely sick round here. The amount of damage that he did with the sheriff and his utility was really insane, and it was only barely just it was only barely possible for Liquid to hold on there. It went down to like last man. It's really nuts, all things considered. So but that's like the one that's like that can happen in TAC FPS. Like it's a one small mistake that can look a lot bigger than the mistake actually is. And if they addressed it correctly, none of those they wouldn't lose the players in that key timing. Because I also think about when those kills came in from Zipan. They came in a timing of the round, which then created desperation for Liquid. If it was towards the end of the round, just before they already took the site, then it's not as bad. But yeah, so there's just there's just a lot to. Nothing is ever as simple as it first appears. I think.
Yeah, but you could always go the easy route and just say smokes will fix everything, but I don't
Yeah,
want to harp on that too
gonna fix
much.
Omen.
Yeah. But so this round, we're just going to see like another contact A. They got link up towards A main, posted up with the op, trying to see if anyone's peeking. And FPXer is playing this double setup towards tree, so they're anticipating some sort of cap play this round. They have Angel posted up top mid as well. So they're definitely expecting that there's going to be like a heavy force coming through cat, but they're set up to retake A anyways with where everyone's positioned, so it doesn't really matter if they take the site. So this is like a pretty good call from Liquid. Then they have Scream just kind of like faking mid presence. He just flashes out, try to push people off some angles. They do this a lot, so I think this might have been another read that they can get Soulcast kind of up to Cat for free, because there's going to be a lot of rounds this half where he's able just to walk up Cat for free.
I actually really like the defender setup on this round. I think like giving up the A site proper is actually really smart in certain rounds, and relying on the cipher trip because depending on the team, most teams will not like hard luck A to the degree that they'll actually try to walk someone in there. So you can get away with the trip, and playing this site retake. As long as you have tree, you're good to go on the retakes most of the time. So nice. It was a nice utility set. I like that from Soulcast a lot. What he did with the ult was actually so huge. With the ult alone, he was able to basically buy the entire site and also maintain control around catwalk. And this is some of the post-plant protocols I think that you were talking about, Mike, coming in from Liquid that were pretty good.
Yeah, so like you can see already, like FPX, we're gonna play retake A, except now here's the issue with your retake setup, because Liquid have Soulcast towards Cat still because he ults up Cat, so you know that info. But now they can keep a person A main as well, so they really have to like they can focus on Heaven because they know Soulcast can pick anyone coming up Cat and call that as well out from tree. So you have really good post plant positions here, and then we'll see the fault line that we really like, and then the little protocol they have after it. So here comes the fault line. Grim jumps up and then gets one. So now you've gone from a 5v5, which isn't very favorable for you because they have like a Sova and a Cypher, and now you just narrowed it down to a 5v4. But then here's the post plant positioning. There's all like basically strangling everyone that comes into the site, just exhausting any avenue you have into the site because they have every angle covered except for like Heaven, which is the only area they've allowed the defenders to control, really.
Yeah, it feels like in some senses Breach like changes the game so much with that like one fault line, just because again like the rafters position is like typically maybe if there's a sage you'll see like some slow orbs up there, or like maybe the ice wall that can get destroyed, or something, but there's nothing quite like the fault line which can basically hit everybody, and it's not really dodgeable if you're deep enough. And I don't even know if there is a deep enough. If you're on the rafters in general, you're going to get hit by it unless you're so widely swung that you're already open to the angles of the attackers already. So it feels like that's such a strong denial of control. When I first saw that, I was like, oh my god, this is actually so interesting how this can change how retakes work. I feel like you never want the breach to get onto that site. You never want them to be able to have the ability to run around like that, because that seems like a perfect counter to the A retake setup.
Yeah, I think that's like where Breach's fault line shines a lot, because you see basically every team's going to be doing what Shadow's doing here, and they're just going to like deny you if you're trying to peek with an op or do anything fast, since it's a ability that recharges. So you might as well like, this is something that kind of annoys me with people that play Sova too. It's like if you have an ability that recharges, you might like potentially get caught out when you don't have it sometime. But if you get in a like if you use it in a scenario where you use it at the very start of the round, chances are you're going to be able to use it at least one more time, if not three. And then if the bomb goes down, you can probably use your recon like 4 times in a round. So you can get
Yeah.
a lot of value out of it, especially with like the breach stun. So on this round, we've seen this setup before from, I think, Cloud9 or Envy. So Zipan's just going to walk into Wine, and then Meadow's going to have his Cypher cam that can spot the cross for him. And then he can basically just play off contact, because then the Cypher cam's fine for him. He doesn't have to worry about anyone walking up on him. And then if someone was there, he would just swing off that information. But Liquid are very, like, aware of maybe a potential, like, gelato push, so that's why you see Link and Cryptix playing super far back top mid.
It's an interesting adjustment. I wonder, like, if Liquid understand that FPX, like, I wonder if FPX made this adjustment on with the setup around Wine and the cam and everything, specifically because of how amazingly well the previous round went for Liquid. Because this setup would be obviously a lot better, a lot more suited to deal with it. But
Yeah,
either way, it's nice that Liquid just like mix things up, especially this early on. There's still like 6 more rounds to play in the half, so
and then like this work up mid from Eccles is really good. So even though he doesn't have any utility left because he helped them get control of B main, so now he's not really worth a whole lot, except he has extreme value in mid because he can break this trip. And then on the split, instead of having Angel and Market, now he falls back and then gets picked off. So he really divides up and slows these rotates, which allows everyone coming out B main to like isolate these fights with no support, because then they're trapped in the back of sight. And then it's just a matter of time for you to clear out all these angles when you have all these flashes. It should be fairly easy. And then the rest of the round is just pretty straightforward.
yeah, this is really nice. I feel like these last 2 rounds have been like a good demonstration, actually, of the strength of this composition when things are going well in terms of spacing and timings and utility usage. And you're kind of seeing a good look as to how how it functions at its best. Obviously, as mentioned, Liquid will. There are some rounds in which they lose kind of just because of more fundamental mistakes that aren't really related to the composition itself per se. But yeah, this is a good demonstration of how it works. And I think on this map too, again, it's difficult to deal with. Also because if you think about it like this, one of the things about this burst style we talked about is it's really powerful for the defenders to get information and push stuff early on if they possibly can do it. It's not really possible because of a mixture of the Killjoy due to the alarm bot on the turret, but also because if let's say Liquid slow down their timing, they can set up info traps around the map as well. If they condition their opponents to be afraid of the fact that they will be just contacting into places and they need more warning and they wanted to make info plays, Liquid can then just slow down and then create traps. So that's another danger of playing against a team that's doing this style that Liquid is doing.
Yeah, and I think this round will be like a pretty decent highlight if I remember right, for like losing the round just from mistakes kind of instead of based on comps. So they have Link towards A main again, denying info. And here they have Slowcast basically gain up cat for free. They're taking all of this space. I think they were kind of aware of like maybe a setup that FPX do towards cat, because now he knows, okay, there's someone that was facing me here because of the noise and shooting, and then he can molly one of these guys out and deny the trade off this. And he's totally aware of like what angle that Zipan's going to be on. He pre-fires it. He's got the diabolical aim ready, so he's warmed up. But yeah, and then over towards B main as well, like Scream is like denying so much info. He's pushing them back because now they're worried about the burst because, oh, Scream's here flashing. They might be bursting on us or something like that. So there's like already so much like chaos across the map. And then this is kind of like what we were talking about, like where it can fail. And it reminded me a lot of Liquid on day one, where it's kind of like you get a lot of map control, you get a lot of advantages, but then you're just kind of facing, right? And you're not using the advantages of your comp, which that is that like really explosive, we can flash off every angle type of deal. Instead, it's just kind of like this dry facing 1v1s in a bunch of different spots.
Yeah, and even that kill from Cryptics there, obviously he's coming from an angle that he's already passed the cross, so it's unexpected. But at the same time, as you say, it is a dry peak, and he is basically by himself there. It's not like his teammate could have swung to trade after him. So yeah, I completely agree. It was kind of strange to see things devolve as they did in this round, but that happens, and yeah, it was also something that when I saw this, I was just thinking like this really is the opposite of what I expected to see from this composition. But they have shown some good stuff already in terms of using the utility in the correct way. And only 2 rounds so far as well. So far it's been like a very successful half, and that's like an insanely good pick to get. And oh, Sipan though,
Yeah,
he
so
is
they
kind
go
of good.
back to this explosive A setup, and then you can see in the kill feed that Chao picked two of them off towards A main with his Sova ult. That's one of the things that we've kind of talked about before is like when we look at like someone like Sinatra, it's the angle of the ult, right? Because he was ulting from bottom mid, so I'll just like follow my tracer or my cursor across the screen. So when he's ulting from here, he has like such a good pathway to cover like this entire area basically when people are lined up. And since you're in this like extremely narrow hallway, no matter what direction you go, and he has such a good angle, so it doesn't matter if you run vertically or horizontally, he can cover so much ground with that ult. So it's just kind of like unfortunate spacing that loses them this round because they like annihilated that wine control, except Zipan gets two there, which helps them out a lot, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting too because they were FPX were somewhat expectant of the A main pushes and so on. So they did have the kind of presence of mind to feel like that setup would be good at some point, and they had a good read in that sense. But yeah, that is an interesting ult because I hadn't seen that ult angle. And when I was watching this, it was I had to check a couple times to like understand why is it Link the only one left alive right now when they just got that opening pick and traded onto Zipan. But, obviously, like, yeah, the ult from mid, I didn't actually know that that was, like, a thing, so that's actually pretty sick as a solo player myself.
Yeah. So then FPX are just going to keep doing this wine control setup because it worked before, but Liquid are just going to go for this like B main aggression. They have Link clearing all these angles with Op, being super aggro, and then they can just burst off this. And now Scream has thrown that flash like a few times toward mid to push someone off the mid angle, go a little bit of presence. So now they have B main control again. And FPX have gone for like a really heavy mid setup as well, so they're trying to make sure no one's getting up cap because there's a few times that Soulcast has just been able to walk up cap for free. And then they do a decent combination here with all of their ults, so now they're just going to wait because they know whoever's on this site is extremely isolated. Soulcast ults in, he gets the info on where that person is. And then this is where I thought there was like a lot of mistakes because okay, so you ult the site so you know anyone in the site's detained, you know one's detained, and then you don't use any of your flashes to get out into the site because like since you don't have any smokes or anything, people are going to be holding these angles, and that's where you need to be using your flashes to either push people off those angles or to take the duels against them and spawn and market.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree on the same page with that one. It seemed like there was the cool thing as well is that, like, there's so many ways that it felt like they could have won this rounds, even if like, because they got all this space. It's kind of insane. Like the Killjoy ult as well. Like it should have been when I saw the setup there. I was like, this looks super good. Like it doesn't really seem like there's too much that can really stop this if they are able to execute correctly off of what, like in theory, off of what they have. So yeah, I was on the same page with you on that one. I don't really have anything else to add to it, but I do think that in terms of like for them looking back at that particular round, it feels like there's lots of options on the attack for them. Like because of even with that mid setup, it feels like they can challenge that really effectively if they wanted to with the utility that they have as well. And I do wonder, like, because the other thing I was thinking about this round as well, or that past round, is the fact that it's sure that there is like a more mid information, but the mid information doesn't really tell FPX that much. And FPX still aren't really pushing B main or A main. They've got players who are in forward positions, but not really pushing those positions. So it could still be that like the entire team of Liquid is in B lobby or is in gelato, just waiting for something. And I find that to be an interesting dynamic too. I would have liked to have seen what would have happened if Liquid would have played an even like a super slow pace, or even tried to run some fakes. But we don't see that. Obviously, like they try to keep the the strategies to the bread and butter of just this contact based style.
I think the
Yeah.
thing that kind of surprised me the most was just that when you're bursting through B main like that, I think it would have been perfect because they had Echo still had all three flashes, so he can flash them out, but he had his breach ult as well, so he could stay towards B main because one got detained from the Killjoy ult, so now you're in a 5v4 effectively for like, is it like 4 or 5 seconds? I want to say maybe six
Oh, it's more than
seconds.
that. It's more
Yeah.
than, isn't it like 8 seconds or something? I feel like it's 8 seconds.
Okay. Sometimes it feels slower, sometimes it feels faster. So, you're in a 5v4 for that amount of time. You know that like you're not going to meet much resistance outside of that because unless they're just running into the site, which I don't think FPX's comp really allows for or their style personally. So you can flash them out and then you have your breach ult because okay, we have B main control, we have the Killjoy stuff set up, and then we can use the ult to fight them when they finally start retaking from market and spawn. And then everyone that's backside actually has a decent chance at surviving instead of, well, we're just going to contact out, or just not really contact out, run out, since we know one's detained. I think that was the major thing is like they saw the one detained and they got so focused on like, oh, this guy's backside, we need to go kill him. Or he's like, in the sewer area somewhere, like he's on site somewhere detained, we need to kill him now. I think they got super focused in on that aspect.
Yeah, and I just double checked as well. It is 8 seconds that the detain has. Basically prevents you from using any abilities or shooting or anything.
Gotcha.
It's a long time.
Yeah, so I think there's like a few different ways that they can definitely turn that around because it was looking like really favorable for them, like you said, because even though FPX had like wine control and mid control, they didn't really have like a whole lot of information.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
So then this was another like heavy mid round fast from Liquid that we'll see where they try to take heavy mid control. Except FPX are also going for this now. They're double facing Cat, and then they have the two people holding top mid and tiles. And then this is just another area where they're trying to get Scream up mid fast, but nothing really to push anyone holding an angle off Cat with.
What's really cool actually as well, about FPX and just like having Zipan in this position where he just is able to just like find any little edge to get kills is that if you are gonna have any issues fun in your fundamentals in terms of like spacing and just like clearing angles correctly, who's covering what, Zipan is gonna show you where those weaknesses are because he's just gonna wreck you because of how good
Yeah.
he is. So that is like a positive at least, is that the mistakes are clearly highlighted by that fact.
Yeah, I think like they were so expectant probably on like FPX going for like that heavy wine control again because they ran into it 2 times, I think, that they actually faced it, and then FPX ran it a few times that they obviously didn't know. But they were probably just expecting, okay, we can get mid for free because Soulcast walked up mid a few times like that. So, but yeah, they definitely like they have the Reina flash, but if someone takes this like more off angle towards deep cat, then obviously doesn't cover them, and they're just trying to get Scream into mid fast. And then I think this is the round where FPX they expect like a B hit because they're not playing heavy mid. Yeah, so they're playing like the similar setup towards A where they have Meadow under Bauk and then Zipan's playing contact. So it's kind of like the pistol round again, and they're just playing this heavy B setup. Except now Liquid are gonna try to fight Cat, so they just walk up Cat for free this round because there's no one contesting them mid. And I think this might have, I'm not sure if this was like an on the fly thing, because Soulcast goes up tree by himself, which I think this split is really strong, splitting through tree. It's just, I don't think one person is enough for it. If you have two people there, you definitely get the trade plus one more maybe. I just think it's like super hard to fight that angle by yourself, especially since FPX kind of had that info over towards B, and then they fast rotate over. Plus, they kind
Yeah,
of know against this comp, like, you're gonna, like, commit pretty much every time.
yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things where that's the play by yourself, which makes sense if there is the distraction for it. But otherwise, you don't know exactly what you're running into, and a lot of teams, until they're ready to actually like rotate in together and retake together, they may not be in a position where they're going to try to um, just like swing out and not be ready for that. I feel like, you know, you are absolutely thinking about that spot getting pushed every time when the side take comes in, especially given the fact that they had given up the tree control, so they're super aware of where their holes are. So that's something that they would very much expect. So it's kind of an overextension in that sense. What would have been cool is just positioning like underneath the window and you know just like that's probably as far as you can maybe go in that sense. But yeah, it's just one of those small details, I think, and it's very easy for us to like pick those apart. But yeah, that just ends up being a bad timing, unfortunately.
Well,
Oh shit, that's it.
yeah, that's the entire half. It goes a lot faster when people are just like committing and taking fights very frequently. That's the one thing, like, we're so used to teams defaulting all the time and trying to break down their defaults, and they're executing with like 30 seconds or less in the round, where this is a lot quicker pace and a little bit different to digest, I would say, because there's a lot less to look at normally. But
Yeah, for sure. A quick thank you to Sliggy for the subscription. Thanks, man. We love you, Kona. And we actually, I feel like in this episode, some people might feel like we were defending liquids too much, but in the sense that I don't think there is a defense that's necessary except the defense against idiocy. Like that's what you know. I think because I think it's really important for people to do proper analysis, and a lot of like I'm definitely on board for criticism that comes from a place of good analysis. And but the problem is that the some of the surface level stuff that I've seen is not really justifiable. So there you go.
yeah, I think like I would have been fine with people saying like, oh, smokes were the issue if they actually picked out like, oh, here's a round where if they had like a smoke here or something, it would have changed it. But like we said, it changes entirely like the way you're playing, the pace, the way or like the fights you're actually wanting to take. Like everything changes when you're like differentiating from Omen or Brimstone or something like that. So it's not that simple as like just slotting in an agent. I think we're gonna unfortunately see that a lot in the future when people try to experiment, that they think, oh, this would all be fixed by someone being on this agent instead, because people tend to scapegoat to something very simple like that, where an agent is the issue and not necessarily like the team player, the strats or the mid round calling or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't wait to see what else we get out of them. And Connor was teasing some stuff, ideas that he had. But I think Mocha GG had a question about Mamba modes. I think he was asking about we did and asking us our thoughts on we did's performance on Viper. And I think that was the question, just like generally what we
Yeah,
thought
I remember
about
seeing that.
what's that?
I remember seeing that earlier. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say. Um,
Um. So yeah, just hit me with it, Mike.
I think the map I was most impressed was on Bind, I think, with the B setup we saw and like all the
Hmm.
different ways he manipulated that front sight smoke on B, where you'd like go into it and climb up and peek hookah. There's just like so many different ways that he plays it. And that was only like, what did the guy say? The manager was saying that they had only used Viper for like a week or 10 days or something like that before this event. So I thought like those guys were a perfect example of like what Viper play could be like at the pro level. I don't know if we're going to see it because I think it's such a vastly different play style compared to other agents, but I think Viper's going to be extremely viable on like every map except for Haven, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I also thought that that bind setup did actually blow my mind. I don't know if that's something that you've seen, Sliggy. I want you guys to incorporate that shit. That was amazing. But that like whole I'm since seeing that, I kind of feel like I need to get on the Viper to see if I can find some similar kinds of setups because it was like it just using the poison orb firstly. I mean, there was some other cool stuff with the ult and some of the walls, but just the ability. And for those of you that don't remember, I don't know, I guess we can just describe it. Basically, the poison orb was placed in front of the metal container on the B bomb site of Bind, such that when triggered, it covers the entire metal container, basically. And because it's so tall, it actually allows you to reposition out of the metal container to the right or to the left, and then jump up inside of the smoke on top of the metal container. And then you basically have this like, so you basically have three different ways to reposition within that one spot, which was actually extremely strong because when we did actually go for the reposition on top of the metal container, it completely caught his opponents off guard because it's just crazy. And but not only just sort of the repositional plays, but the delay in general. It also allows for I think it's very intimidating to see that smoke as the attackers. You kind of want it to go away because it's very difficult to predict what's happening in the site. And then on top of that, in terms of retake, the retake possibilities. It increases the strength of your ability to retake as the defenders because when that smoke is up, it's going to cover quite a lot of ground and vision towards spawn and backside as well. So it just has loads of utility. It's like one of the best Viper smokes I think I've seen.
Yeah, and I hope we see more of it in the future. They'll probably just keep buffing her, because why not? Especially after, like, how this patch went, I wouldn't be surprised, but I definitely think that was, like, especially on, like, Ascent and Split, they had very good fundamental knowledge of, like, okay, we're gonna retake with Viper, but we absolutely have to control this area with that setup. And then once we control that area consistently, then we know like exactly what or who's doing what on the retake given what utility we have. They seemed like very thorough in their retakes. Even though we thought like Luminosity were making some post plan errors, but generally I think Viper could be like very strong. It's just not, it's such a different way of thinking about the game, I think, compared to like other controllers. Just like comparing her to Brimstone, it feels like so different when you play her, just because you're thinking more of the retake aspect than anything else. She's also like viable the entire round because her utility is always going to be there, and then she has two mollies that are pretty good, so.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in the future, as we see more agents added into the game, we'll surely have more stuff that will synergize with her extremely well. It's just going to happen. Um, Right. With that said, I don't think there's anything else to go over in terms of the demo, in terms of the composition we saw today, and the questions in chat and all that. So we have ourselves another show coming this Saturday at the usual time at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So you have that to look forward to. Did we already tell people about the guests, or we not?
Nope.
Okay, no, we didn't do that. Okay, so we'll we'll yeah, never mind.
We'll get there.
Right. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled on the Immortal Minds Twitter account. We have an Instagram account now as well, so you guys can follow that. And as always, we have a pretty vibrant Discord community where people are, talking about any live matches that are going on. Also finding people to play with that are similar levels, and you can even, I think, tag yourself as certain agents as well. So if you want to search for, very specific teammates, you can do that to make your matchmaking life a little bit less toxic, a little bit more productive, perhaps. But with that said, I think that's everything from me. Do you have anything you want to tell people about, Mike?
If you also join the Discord, you can listen to me moan about the patches when they come out if there's something I think that needs to be nerfed but is in the patch. So that'll be about every 2 weeks on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sliggy. And we'll catch you guys on Saturday.